Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday webinar. My name is Lanai, and I host these webinars every week on Wednesday. Today, we are going to be looking at comparison. Now, the comparison question comes up for every exam board, and it can be quite a tricky question for students, especially because it's a skill that is not practiced, I would say, as often in my experience um, as a classroom teacher in a secondary school. I did find that comparison wasn't something that we practiced as much, especially leading up to GCSEs. So sometimes it can be a forgotten skill, but it's a very, very important skill. And it's reflected in how many marks are rewarded for this. So it's an important skill. It can be quite difficult. However, one of the key things about comparison is that it's at the end of your section A, meaning you can use a lot of the things that you've learned about the text already in your comparison. Okay, the reason why that question is usually the final one of the section, is always the final question of whatever section it's included in, is because you're using all your knowledge so far. Okay, so remember that. Remember to use all your knowledge of the text up to that point in the exam in order to inform your response for the comparison. Okay, so like I said, we are looking at comparison. Okay, so when it comes to some of the things that you need to focus on, perspectives, meaning the perspective, the point of view of the narrator or the writer, the ideas expressed. So in every mark scheme, they refer to the perspectives and ideas. So when it comes to AO3, you need to have a focus on the perspectives and ideas and compare how they are conveyed, how they're shown. The other thing that you can compare are the themes that come up between the texts. You can also compare language and structure. Again, like I said, you are using your knowledge of the text up to that point. So you would have done a language question, a structure question, an evaluation question. And this is like the culmination of everything. So everything, don't be afraid to repeat some of the points that you may have made earlier on in the exam paper. You are using all that knowledge to compare. So like I said, I surveyed the mark schemes. I surveyed the AQA, the EDUCAS, EdExcel, and the OCR mark schemes. And some of the things that I picked out, like I said, you are comparing ideas and perspectives. You want to be perceptive. So that second bullet point there, be perceptive, meaning look beyond the obvious, okay? Show that you understand a range of similarities. So you want and differences. Okay, so when you're comparing, you're looking at similarities and differences. And you want to make sure that you've got at least 4. So 2 similarities and 2 differences. And then you want to make sure that you compare the use of language and structure techniques as well. Sometimes people think, I don't know what to write about, I don't know what to say. You can talk about the use of writer's language and structure techniques. Some mark schemes call it writer's method, but it's basically language and structure techniques, okay? So far up to this point, you can let me know what exam board that you are with, okay? And that will help me to tailor what I'm saying during this webinar, okay? So today's question is compare how the writers in text 1 and text 2 present an unfamiliar setting. So if you did the descriptive writing webinar, one of these texts is going to be familiar to you. I've used this text before in the webinars, but obviously today we're using it for comparison. It's the Jane Eyre, The Red Room. So one of the texts we've looked at before. And the other text is by H.G. Wells, and it's a description of another red room. Okay, so they're immediately very similar texts. But in this question, we're looking at how this unfamiliar setting is presented. So when you get your question, always make sure that you make a note of the key things that you're being asked to compare. Okay, So in this question, it's an unfamiliar setting. So we're going to make sure when we respond that we use that keyword in our paragraphs to make sure we have that focus on the effect of that unfamiliar setting and how it's presented. Excuse me. I thought this news coming along, sorry. Okay, so we're going to read a section, okay, of both texts. We're not going to read the whole of both texts, okay? But for text 1, it is a narrator who's unnamed, and he goes to explore this room, which is rumored to be haunted, but he's skeptical, okay? So that's text 1. The narrator, he goes to willfully explore this room called the Red Room, and it's rumored to be haunted, but he is skeptical, okay? And then we'll look at text 2. So we're going to read just these sections only because they're quite lengthy and we might not have time to read all of them. You would have been sent them beforehand, so hopefully you've had time to read through all of the whole text. But if you haven't had a chance to do that, I've got the key quotes that we're going to be using today. They'll be displayed for you to see and work with. So don't worry too much if you haven't read the whole thing. So like I said, text 1, the narrator, we're never given a name. He's there, he wants to be there. It's a haunted place, rumored to be haunted, but he's skeptical. So this part of the text reads, I must confess some impalpable quality of that ancient room disturbed me. I tried to fight the feeling down. I resolved to make a systematic examination of the place, and so, by leaving nothing to the imagination, dispel the fanciful suggestions of the obscurity before they obtained a hold upon me. After satisfying myself of the fastening of the door, I began to walk round the room, peering round each article of the furniture, tucking up the valances of the bed, and opening its curtains wide. In one place, there was a distinct echo of my footsteps. The noises I made seemed so little that they enhanced rather than broke the silence of the place. I pulled up the blinds and examined the fastenings of the several windows. Attracted by the fall of a particle of dust, I leaned forward and looked up the blackness of the wide chimney. Then, trying to preserve my scientific attitude of mind, I walked round and began tapping the oak paneling for any secret opening. But I desisted before reaching the alcove. I saw my face in a mirror white. Okay, so that's a section from text 1. Now text 2. So actually, before we move on to text 2, just jot down your thoughts, okay, about the setting so far. Okay, so the question is about how an unfamiliar setting is presented, comparing how an unfamiliar setting is presented. So based on what we've just read there, you can also think about the whole text if you've had a chance to read it. If not, like I said, you can just focus on what we've read so far. Based on text 1, how would you describe this unfamiliar setting? So we know it's unfamiliar, but how else would you describe it? So I'll give you a minute before we move on to reading text 2. How would you describe the setting as described as shown in text 1? Okay, so eerie, good. Uncanny. Why do you say uncanny? It's definitely eerie, I would say. Thank you, Sophie. Okay, so we'll look at text 2 in a minute. I've got one more question actually about text 1. Because this question asks us to explore ideas and perspectives, How would you describe the narrator, the perspective of the narrator? So how is he coming across in this unfamiliar environment? What do you think his perspective is of this unfamiliar environment? So I'll repeat that question. Focusing now on the narrator, what do you think his perspective is of this unfamiliar environment? We can come back to that question, okay? So we'll come back to that question after we've read text two and thinking about it might be easier to note the differences after we've looked at this section of text two, okay? So thank you so far. So yes, it's an eerie atmosphere, a little bit disturbing, unsettling, okay? Definitely. Okay, so text two. My seat, to which Bessie and the bitter Miss Abbott had left me riveted, was a low ottoman near the marble chimney-piece. The bed rose before me. To my right hand there was the high, dark wardrobe with subdued, broken reflections, varying the gloss of its panels. To my left were the muffled windows. A great looking-glass between them repeated the vacant majesty of the bed and room. I was not quite sure whether they had locked the door, and when I dared move, I got up and went to see. Alas, yes, no jail was ever more secure. Returning, I had to cross before the looking glass, which is a mirror. My fascinated glance involuntarily explored the depth it revealed. All looked colder and darker in that visionary hollow than in reality, and the strange little figure there gazing at me with a white face and arms specking the gloom and glittering eyes of fear moving where all else was still had the effect of a real spirit. I thought it like one of the tiny phantoms, fairy half imp, Bessie's evening stories represented as coming out of lone ferny dells in moors and appearing before the eyes of belated travellers. I returned to my stool. So that's text two, and there she opens by talking about how where she's seated, and she says that she was left riveted, which means frozen, okay, in one place. And we can see there that in this text, she only moves to check if the door is unlocked, and then she goes back to her seat, okay. So with that in mind, going back to that question that I asked about how the narrators are presented, because again, this question asks us to explore perspectives, okay? And the perspectives that we are presented with are those of the narrators. So how do you think the narrator in text two compares to the narrator in text one? How do they compare? So think about what they do and what that might tell us about how they're feeling in that environment. I'll give you just a minute for that one. So again, think about what they do and what that shows about how they're feeling in that environment. Okay, more oppressed. Good. So yes, the narrator in text two, okay, she does seem more oppressed, okay, within that unfamiliar environment. Good. So what can we therefore say about text one? If text two comes across as oppressed, especially because she was put there, okay, text one, how does that narrator come across in comparison? Yes, there's a sense that the narrated text one is more open, more free. Okay, that the narrated text one is walking. Okay, around tapping things. Okay, exploring. So we've definitely got that difference. Okay, in terms of how the narrators are. So therefore, their perspective, their perspective on um, their perspective on regarding these rooms, this unfamiliar setting, okay, is different. Okay, um, what narration is being used here? Is it first person? Is it third person narration? The first person meaning I, me, okay, the narrator is relaying their experiences, or is it third person where they're talking about they, him, her? It's first person narration, okay? So because it's first person narration, we know and understand that it, these are their perspectives. Good, first person in both, okay? So that's similarity we can see. Okay, so now we're going to start adding more detail. So we've got a clearer overview, okay, of some of the differences and similarities. They're both first person narration text. But however, one narrator is coming across as more oppressed within this unfamiliar environment, whereas the narrator in text two is uh, freer. Okay. But now I want you to have a look at the quotes that I've put on the screen. Okay. So it might be the case that you've got maybe other quotes in mind if you've already read the text. If not, just focus on the quotes that are on the screen for text one and text two. And I want you to think about um, the differences and similarities that are shown. So, like I said, for this question, you want to have at least four paragraphs, okay? At least four paragraphs. Aim for two similarities and two differences because when you're comparing, that's what you're looking at similarities and differences. So, to practice that element, okay, I want you to tell me what similarities and differences you can see across the two texts using the quotes that are shown on the screen. And for this task, I'll put 2 minutes, okay? I will say 2 minutes for this, and then you can type in your answers, okay? So I'll give you time to do that, and then we'll look at some similarities and differences um, for 2 minutes starting now. Okay, 1 minute left. So looking at the quotes that are on the screen, what similarities and differences can you spot across the two texts? Okay, time is up. Okay, so we'll have a look then, and you can type in any. Okay, thank you, Ray. Both describe their face as white after they see their face through the mirror. Good, yes, that is a similarity. Okay, thank you, Ray. Okay, we'll have a look at some more. Continue to type in your answers. So in the blue box there, so Wells's narrator is there voluntarily. Okay, like we said, he's choosing to be there, whereas Bronte's narrator is trapped. Okay, that's a key difference in the perspective of the narrators there. Okay, the fact that one has chosen to be there, whereas the other one is trapped there, and we can see this reflected in their actions within this room. The narrator in text one by H.G. Wells, he is exploring, okay? He's looking around the room, whereas with Bronte's narrator, she hardly moves, okay? She only moves to check if the door is locked. So that's a key difference. They are both uneasy and frightened, okay? Bullet point 3, people have died in both rooms, adding a suggestion of the supernatural in both settings. Next bullet point, Bronte's narrator lives in the house her red room is located in, whereas Wells's narrator does not. Okay, so she's very familiar with the day-to-day activity around the room. If you've read the whole extract, in Jane Eyre, text 2, the narrator begins by telling us why nobody, no, she doesn't tell us why yet, but she begins by telling us that the fact that hardly anyone goes into that room. Okay, so she knows that room well and the surrounding, obviously the house. The next one is both rooms are big. Okay, and Sophie, you mentioned the furniture of within those rooms. Okay, so the grandeur of the rooms also plays a part in creating the maybe unsettling feelings within those rooms. Okay, the fact how big they are, how much is in those rooms. They're quite grand rooms. Okay. Wells's narrator is trying to resist the sense of apprehension he has, whereas Bronte's narrator seems helpless. So again, thinking about the effect of the room on those narrators, Wells's narrator tries to push those feelings away. Okay. So once you have looked at the similarities and differences, okay, you then have the points that you have for your paragraphs. Okay. So the points that you make in each paragraph should either be a point about a similarity across both texts or a point about a difference across both texts. Okay. Higher level responses are going to integrate their comparisons. Okay. Instead of doing one chunky paragraph about text one and then one chunky paragraph about text two, okay, and almost looking at them separately, you need to show an interwoven response where your comparisons are fluid, okay, from one thing to the other within the same paragraph, okay, as opposed to looking at them separately, because then it's not a solid comparison. It's not as solid as it could be as a comparison. And we'll look at how to do that, okay? But the first step is what we've just done now, okay? Create some points about similarities and differences, okay? So, because this is a comparison question, you want to use language that demonstrates your comparison, language that helps you to construct your writing well and coherently, and you need to use the right connectives, okay? So these are just some examples of connectives we can use. So to show a similarity, similarly, as well as, also, like, and then to show a difference, in contrast, on the other hand, however, unlike, okay? There are more that you can explore. These are just some, okay? But you need to make sure that you use connectives, comparison connectives to link what you are saying, okay? So You're now going to have a go at writing your paragraphs, okay? So what I've done is I've put the points that we'll focus on first in the yellow box there, okay? So the point that we want to write about is Wells's narrator is there voluntarily, so he's choosing to be there, whereas Bronte's narrator is trapped, okay? She was put there as a punishment. So that's a difference in the narrator's perspective. Therefore, there's going to be a difference in the impact that this unfamiliar setting has. Okay. So when you're structuring your paragraphs, you want to first of all make a point about a similarity or difference. Okay. So the point in the yellow box there is a difference. Okay. So it's already written out, and you can just start your paragraph that way. Okay. Then you want to move on to your evidence for text one first, okay? So add your evidence for text one and then explain the techniques used in that one. So the language or structure techniques used. So for this question, because um, we're saying the narrator's there voluntarily, whereas Bronte's is trapped, okay? You want to find a quote for text one that shows that he wants to be there, okay? That demonstrates this sense of freedom and exploration that comes with choosing to be there, okay? So that will be your quote for text one, and you can pick from the quotes that are on the screen in the yellow box for text one. Like I said, explain the techniques that are used, okay? What are the words that are helping to show his sense of freedom within this unfamiliar setting? And then after you do that, use a comparison connective, okay? So I've got them there in the orange box, in the orange table, shall I say, okay? Similarity, whether it's a similarity or difference. So because this is a difference, okay, you might pick in contrast, okay? So whatever you've said about text one, then you contrast it. And you say, in contrast, text two shows, and again, we can see, we know that we're going to talk about the fact that she is trapped, okay? Sophie, you mentioned oppression, so that's a good word that you could use here, okay? And you add your evidence for text two. So there, picking from the quotes that are on the screen, think about which quote demonstrates that sense of feeling trapped and oppressed. And like you did for text one, you also explain the techniques that are used there, okay? So I know that's a lot to do, especially within 5 minutes. It's just the time constraints of the webinar. I'm giving you 5 minutes. So if you haven't finished your paragraph, don't worry too much. But after that, we'll look at an example paragraph, okay, to see what you could have written using that point, okay? So we're going to start. Yes, we're going for 5 minutes using the point in the yellow box and the quotes that are on the screen, starting now. Okay, final minute, and then we'll look at an example paragraph. Okay, so we'll have a look at the example paragraph now. Feel free to add in what you've got if you want to give you feedback. You might not have finished yours, that's okay. Okay, so Wells' narrator is there voluntarily, whereas Bronte's narrator is trapped. In text one, the narrator resolves to make a systematic examination of the place. The word examination suggests curiosity, but also has connotations of purpose-driven exploration. This conveys the idea that this unfamiliar setting is fascinating and a place of keen interest to him. On the other hand, in text two, the narrator is trapped and laments no jail was ever more secure. This metaphor conveys a sense that this is an intimidating place for the narrator. Therefore, the reader is more likely to sympathize with any danger the narrator in text two may encounter compared to the narrator in text one because he chose to be there. Okay, so that's what a comparison paragraph would look like. And I've highlighted there the points of comparison within the paragraph, okay, just to show, to demonstrate what I was saying before about weaving your comparison together, okay, in one paragraph, as opposed to leaning on doing one paragraph on text one and then one paragraph on text two, okay? The comparison starts with the point, okay? So in order to make sure that you are doing that, make sure your points, the very first sentence that you write should be a comparison sentence, okay? You can see mine there. I talk about a difference indicated by the connective whereas, okay? So your first sentence should always be a comparison, whether you're talking about a difference or a similarity. That sets the tone for the rest of your paragraph to make sure that you are bouncing between two texts within the same paragraph, okay? So again, that's an example for that particular point that we've just looked at, okay? So we'll move on to the next point, okay? So the next point is a similarity, okay? The first one was a difference. This one is a similarity. Our next paragraph is about a similarity. So the point is they are both uneasy and frightened. They're both uneasy and frightened. So like we did before, make your first point, the first sentence should be a point stating a similarity or difference, just like the one in the yellow box at the top there. Okay, so you can just use that one. Then you need to find your evidence for text one, look at what techniques are used there, and then find your evidence for text two. If I go back to the example paragraph, okay, notice that I talk about language in both texts, okay? I focus on the word examination in the first for text one, and then I focus on the metaphor in text two, okay? So like I said, this question, it's using all the skills up to that point. The exam papers are structured to build on each skill, okay? So you are building up and using everything that you've used so far in this comparison question. Notice as well in my concluding sentence, I've also compared the effect on the reader, okay? I've compared the impact that this has on the reader. The fact that we might sympathize with Jane Eyre in text 2 because she's forced to be there compared to the unnamed narrator in text 1. Okay? So have a go with this one. It's a similarity paragraph. The quotes that are on the screen, the structure of your paragraph is there in the middle. And then you've got, again, some connectives that you can use. And this time, because it's a similarity, okay, you would link your paragraphs with similarly, or not link your paragraph, link your points with similarly as well as, okay, etc. So 5 minutes for this one starts now, and then after the 5 minutes, we'll look at the example paragraph for this point. Sorry, Ray, is that a question? You said both extract. You are looking at both extracts, right? If that's what you're asking, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, I should say. Okay, time is up for that one. Hopefully you've had a chance to at least make a start on that one. So the example paragraph is here. So in this one, the unfamiliar setting causes both narrators to be frightened and uneasy. This is demonstrated in the identical event of looking in the mirror. In text one, the narrator notes, I saw my face in a mirror, white. The adjective white shows how pale he looked, suggesting that this was the effect of the frightening setting. The fact that this is the only thing he notes, with the use of a dash for emphasis, suggests it was unexpected and surprising. Similarly, in text two, Jane Eyre described her reflection as the strange little figure there gazing at me with a white face. The adjective strange suggests she doesn't recognize herself, which highlights the profoundly unsettling effect the red room had on her. Okay, so again, there I've highlighted the points of comparison within the paragraph, and similar to the difference when we're looking at a difference, I analyzed language in both extracts and looked at the differences there. Okay, so that's that example, and I'm trying to think what else I can highlight. Yeah, there's nothing more to say about this paragraph. If you've got any questions, you can add them to the chat. But that's what a similarity paragraph might look like. Okay, the opening sentence is comparison. It's focusing on a similarity, and then you look at the both texts following that in order to demonstrate that similarity that you've noted. Okay. Okay, so we're moving on to the next paragraph. Okay, so for this paragraph, the point that we're going to write a paragraph for is Wells's narrator is trying to resist the sense of apprehension he has, whereas Bronte's narrator seems helpless. So we've gone back to looking at a difference, okay? And notice how the previous difference, it kind of leads into this one because they are both frightened, okay? However, the way that they deal with that fear is different. So sometimes you might find that as you're looking at a similarity, you can spot a difference within that similarity, okay? And you can just create another paragraph from that, or you could integrate that into a previous paragraph. I haven't got an example of that. I've just got an example for this one for how you look at it as a separate paragraph. But you might find as you're looking at a similarity, you think, okay, that's similar. However, there is a difference here. Just add it to whatever you're saying. Okay. So again, it's the same structure. Okay. Your first sentence, I'll emphasize that once again, should be noting a difference or similarity. Your first sentence should be comparing. Okay. So I would say avoid starting your sentence with in text one, the narrator or the writer shows, and then writing a whole paragraph about text one, and then doing a separate one. Your very first paragraph should be a comparison where you're saying something about both texts, whether it's a difference or whether it's a similarity, okay? Your first paragraph should always be comparing either a difference or a similarity. And then again, you follow the structure, add your evidence, explain, compare, add your evidence, and explain, okay? So we'll have 5 minutes. I put this, the question on the screen because I just realized it wasn't there. Okay, just to remind you, compare how the writers in text one and text two present an unfamiliar setting. And that's important because you want to make sure that you're referring back to the question. Although I talk about the narrators, okay, I do link back to the setting, okay? Unfamiliar setting is in my very first sentence, okay? Frightening setting, I will refer to the frightening setting there for text one, okay? So remember to link back to the question. Right, I will stop talking now and I'll give you 5 minutes again. So you can add your paragraphs either Maybe you were completing your first paragraph. Whatever you want to add a comment on for feedback, do that. But we've got 5 more minutes now for this paragraph, and then we'll look at the example for that. So 5 minutes starting now. Okay, 2 minutes left before we look at the example for this one. 2 minutes left. Okay, 5 minutes is up for that one. Okay, let's take a look at what we could have said. Okay, so Wells's narrator is trying to resist the sense of apprehension he has, whereas Bronte's narrator seems helpless. So again, opening sentence is a comparison. In text one, despite saying the ancient room disturbed me, he tried to fight the feeling down. This highlights how much control he is attempting to maintain in a frightening and unfamiliar environment. The verb fight conveys his determination to remain calm and focused on his purpose there. Similarly, Jane Eyre in text 2 remains in the seat. Bessie, Bessie and bitter Miss Abbott had left her riveted. The word riveted, sorry, that's a mistake. It should say in contrast because it's not a similarity, okay? So I put similarly Jane Eyre in text 2. It shouldn't say that. It should say in contrast or on the other hand, however, something like that, okay? So apologies, that's a mistake. So it should say, in contrast, Jane Eyre in text 2 remains in the seat. Bessie and bitter Miss Abbott had left her riveted. The word riveted highlights her lack of power, and she only moves to check if the door was locked and hurries to the seat. The contrast in how little she moves compared to Wells's narrator, who walked around exploring, highlights the difference that this unfamiliar setting had on the narrators. Okay. So again, that's a difference. Okay, it's showing a difference, and then you explore those differences. Okay, in your paragraph. What else do we have? So, like I said, that similarly should not say that. Okay, it should say in contrast or however, something that shows a difference. Okay, so if you would like feedback on yours, please add them to the chat. I know it's a lot to write, even the 5 minutes, but in the exam you don't actually have a lot of time for this question. I haven't got the timing for every example off the top of my head, but for example, I think for the Edexcel question, you have 14 minutes to write your response to this. So the 5 minutes that I was giving you is about the amount of time, it's even less than the amount of time you have in the exam to actually, write your paragraphs. You haven't got a lot of time. So it might have been challenging, but just to give you a heads up in terms of exam timings, that's around about how much time you have. Okay. So you want to make sure that you practice using your specific exam board timing. So for what we were doing today, obviously, it's looking at the skills that are across the board. Okay. However, you should look at your exam board and look at how much time you're given for that question and practice with a timer for that specific question. Okay. So if I actually do run some groups, example specific groups. So for example, my English mastery group at the moment, the only group I have is AQA. But if there's interest, I can do Edexcel groups or OCR groups if there's enough interest for that. But in those groups, for example, we practice using exam board specific timings, okay, so that you get that practice and actually know how to answer the questions within your times. And then I give students written feedback and we go through example answers. So similar to this, but obviously you get more feedback that's tailored to your work, and you get written feedback to take away as well. So I have a Key Stage 3 group on Tuesdays. I have a GCSE Mastery group on Thursdays 5 to 6 p.m. I also have a GCSE writing group, so that's focusing on narrative writing, focuses also on paper, on nonfiction writing like speeches, letters, and articles. And I have an 11 plus group on Fridays. That's more so for primary school, which I don't suspect anyone here is in primary school. But if you're interested in any of those groups in joining, then you can book on my website. If you've got any questions about that, you can just drop me an email at thenidertutor@gmail.com. And that's it for today. So hopefully you've been able to learn a bit more about the comparison question, getting a chance to practice as well. If you've got any any questions, you can email me. If you've learned something from this video, please leave a like. That would really help this video to get seen by more people who it might help. But thank you so much for joining, and you've done great work. Thank you, Ray. You're very, very welcome. You've worked very hard today. So well done to you, and well done to everybody else who's joined. And again, well done. I'm really proud of everybody who joined these webinars. It shows that you're willing to go the extra mile to make sure you do well. So well done for using your hour this evening to do some work that's going to benefit you in your exams. So well done, and hopefully see you next week. Bye, everyone.